evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. To start our evening, of course, we had a beautiful moment of adoration, a few moments of adoration, which is very, very nice, but I thought we'd start with a short prayer before John begins speaking. So let's pray in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, thank you for bringing us together this evening to open up ourselves to your word, to deepen our relationship with you, and to grow in faith and trust in you. Please, Lord, bless John and the work that he does. We thank you, Lord, that he safely made it here and that he is here with us this weekend to present to us and share with us his story and to help us grow closer to you. Please bless all those who are here, all those who couldn't make it this evening. We ask you, Lord, to help us always be receptive to your word, to the promptings of the Spirit, to help us grow in faith and grow in trust in you. Send your Holy Spirit upon us to guide us in all that we do, and may what we do here tonight bear fruit in our lives, the lives of our families, the life of our parish, and always the life of the church. We make these in all of our prayers through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, we are certainly very glad to welcome Mr. John Edwards here this evening. Drove all the way up from Memphis for the Just a Guy in a Pew Ministries. He's done a lot of work around the country with so many other parishes, and we're so glad to help him here to start our men's fellowship that's already begun, and he's going to give us some more guidance on that as we're going forward. But this evening and tomorrow morning, we're so grateful to have him here to say a few words, to share his story, and see how we can grow in faith through his inspiration. So, John Edwards, thank you very much, and welcome.
All right, thank you. Oh, is that mine? Yeah, I guess that is my mic. It might be the beard hairs. It interferes a lot. So, what's that? I don't know. It's for me, I'm sure. I don't know. See if I can fix it a little bit. Is that better? Nope, that's not better either. Things are short in the wire? Okay. Well, I'll try to be real still. Oh, there one again. Do you have a handheld or anything that might? Okay, well, I can speak to Ambo. Okay, great. No, it's okay. No worries. People to have the noises apparently happening because of my beard. All right. Can you hear me? All right. It's good to be with you all. Thank you, Father, for having me, and to Matthew and Adam and all the guys we've been working with over the past few months. It's just been great, actually really a year. It's been great to get to know you guys, to work with you. And just to be here now, for those of you who knew that we're supposed to be here 2 weeks ago, I apologize for the change. My father passed away unexpectedly, so I wasn't able to make it that weekend. His funeral was that Tuesday, and then, of course, snow and ice-ageddon happened that weekend, and Memphis got hit really hard. So we made the decision to postpone it for travel and just so my family and I could have some time to grieve. So thank you for, whether you knew that or not, thank you for being here tonight and putting up with the rescheduling of the event. But as Father said, my name is John Edwards, and I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, 47 years old. I've got 3 children that are teenagers. I've got a 16-year-old named Jacob and identical twin girls named Allison and Caitlin. Jacob looks like his mother. He's the lucky one. The girls look like me. They're going to have a hard life. So, and they get red hair from me, I guess, because of my red beard. I never knew I had any red hair until I grew my beard. I used to be, when I had hair, brunette. But, yeah, it's a real joy to be with you. As Father said, I run a ministry called Just a Guy in the Pew. We started that. It'll be 10 years next month. I had a lot of addictions, as you'll hear about here in a few minutes in my life. We walked into the parish one night after the guidance of a priest that helped me turn my life around, and we started a men's group. And next thing you know, I had a podcast that a deacon asked me to do that had a show on EWTN. It started being listened to around the world. I thought it'd just be like my parents and me listening to it, but it turned out there were some other people interested in it. And then we started this ministry of going around and helping parishes really grow in the way of accompanying people. One of the next ones we have coming up, we're actually starting a men's and a women's group. I never thought that would happen, but the principles that we're teaching the men here can be applied to anybody and run, and they're successful in a lot of groups around the country. But it wasn't always that way. I wasn't always a disciple of Jesus and the man that I am today. I started my life that way. I grew up in Memphis. Like I said, I'm 47 years old. My parents were from a little town called Bruce in Mississippi, about 30 minutes south from Oxford, where Ole Miss is. They fell in love in the 7th grade and dated, and were all married and moved to Memphis for work because it was the largest city around, and they lived in Memphis for about 40 years. When we moved up to Memphis, I lived on Peabody Avenue in Midtown, which, if you've ever heard the song Walking in Memphis and you hear them say, I saw the ghost of Elvis walking up Union Avenue, I lived one street over from Union Avenue. So never saw the ghost of Elvis any time in my life. Saw a lot of people dressed like him twice a year during his death and birthday weeks, but grew up there. My parents were Baptist. We went to Union Avenue Baptist Church growing up, and from a young age, I was in love with the Lord when I was very young. I just loved church. I loved going in there. Every day the church was open, on Wednesday nights, Friday nights, Sundays, Saturdays. If you were to find a photo album at my parents' house, when, of us growing up, you'd see me from the time I'm in diapers to the time I was 18 with the same group of people. Our church had a great youth group and, children's ministry and young adult and youth group and all those things. But then after that, they didn't have a lot to transition from the youth group to the next level, which would be young adults. It was basically heavily on the young age and very heavily on the elderly age. And there wasn't a lot in between. Now, when I was about 16, my dad told me to get a job, get off the couch and get a job. So I started working at Napa Auto Parts where he worked. He was an executive. He had started in the 70s. That's how he supported our family. And so at 16, I started working there, loading trucks. And like I said, I'd grown up just falling in love with the Lord. I wasn't ever really popular at our Episcopal school. It was a Christian school. I talked about Jesus a lot. And for some reason, people didn't find that attractive, even at a Christian school. So I was made fun of a lot, except during basketball season. People seemed to want me around a lot during that. But so I grew up that way and found my life in the church, and it was that way until I was 18. I had that job, was kind of making a little bit of money so I could pay to go on some of these church trips and things. And then one day when we started to get around 18 years old, all my friends started to look at what they were going to do with their life. And a lot of them knew they wanted to follow in their parents' footsteps. A lot of people in Memphis have obviously gone to SEC schools, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Arkansas, Tennessee, wherever. And so people wanted to follow in their parents' footsteps. My dad went to night school. He had originally gone to Ole Miss to play basketball. He was an incredible basketball player, but he was drafted in the Army, and he never got to live that dream out. And then my mother went to the Mississippi College for Women, so they wouldn't let me in there either, even though I tried to get in. Thought I might find a wife there along the way. But they did not take my application any of the times I tried to turn it in. So anyway, I didn't know what to do with my life, and all of a sudden, all my friends were gone. My community was gone. I didn't have the best relationship with my father growing up. I loved my dad very, very much. But my dad was born on a farm, and he was one of 6 kids. And his parents did not love each other. I did not know that until a few years ago because my paternal grandfather died in a car wreck the year I was born. And so I never got to meet him. I never got to see their dynamic. But I knew growing up that my dad's side of the family was different than my mother's. My mother's side of the family was just hugs and kisses and I love yous and almost to the point like, get off me, But with my dad's family, it was very much very distant handshakes and how are you and not a lot of affection. There weren't any I love yous. There were no I was proud of yous, any of that. So most of my life I spent, my young life, trying to win the affirmation of my father. I didn't realize I had wounds that all of us have that we'll talk about tomorrow in the first session. We're going to talk about identity tomorrow. But we all suffer different wounds. Father wounds, inadequacy wounds, wounds from our own sin, wounds of sins that other people have committed to us. And we don't realize that we live in those. And so I spent a lot of my young life trying to chase my father's love and affection. Looking back, I could say I loved to play basketball, but every time I hit a shot, every time I did anything on a court, guess where I would look? Right at my father. Did he see it? Did he see me? Am I enough? Right? And then I worked in the same company he did, and looking back at that, a lot of that was probably trying to impress him too and doing something that he was good at. So I enrolled in the University of Memphis. I was going to play basketball. I had an opportunity to walk on there, but I tore my knee up my senior year of high school, and those dreams went away. So all of a sudden, I enter into college. I don't know what to do with my life. I'm working. I start going to school. Memphis is a commuter school. We call it affectionately Tiger High, because it's more like everybody knows each other. It's branched out a little bit more, but most people commuted. So every day I would go to work, and then I'd go to classes, or go to classes and go to work. But I was surrounded by thousands of people all the time, and I didn't know a soul. And it was the loneliest I'd been in a long time in my life. So there was this young man that I knew that was still around Memphis. He was about 2.5 years older than me. I'd known him from our Baptist church. He always let me run around with the older kids. And then when I transitioned out of the Episcopal school, I wound up going to a public high school, and he was there. He was 2 years older than me, and he let me run around with the seniors. So he was always kind of there for me. His name was Christian. And so I called him. I said, Christian, I'm going to school every single day. Like, I'm going to class, and I'm trying to talk to girls, and they won't talk to me, and I'm trying to do all these things. And I'd seen a guy walk into one of my classes with a fraternity shirt on, and every girl talked to him. All these other guys were nice to him, so I thought maybe I ought to get me one of those shirts. So I called Christian and said, what are you doing? You're here in Memphis. How did you get acclimated? You're in college. Like, what am I missing? And he said, well, I actually got in a fraternity. It's been really good for me. I'm the rush chairman for a fraternity. And I was like, well, maybe this is a way to get one of those shirts. So I said, tell me about it. He goes, we're right about to start rush season where they take on pledges and people they're going to initiate. And he said, we actually have a get-together tonight at a bar over by Memphis on Highland, and you can come tonight and be with us. See if we like you and you like us. If so, then maybe you can join this and find community. Well, my parents were real Baptists. They didn't drink. They didn't dance. So I grew up in a very sheltered lifestyle. And because of sports, I never really got into any of the drugs or drinking or anything like that in high school. So I thought, what the heck? I'll go and try it out. I'm an extrovert. I should be able to meet people. And so I did. I went that night, and there were lots of girls running around, and I liked that. And there was people drinking. I didn't care so much for that, but they liked me, and I liked them. The next day, they gave me a bid to join the fraternity, and I accepted it. And that was the last day I went to church for about 11 years of my life. You know, I got in the fraternity, and like I said, I didn't realize all the wounds that I had. You know, I didn't understand what all this seeking affirmation and looking for meaning and looking for community and communion. I had that good, solid base growing up, but when I got away from it, everything went awry. And, you know, and since the fall, we all have been looking for communion. That's what we lost. You know, we lost our relationship with God in that moment, that time, our divinity. Right? The Catechism talks about we shed the robes of glory and traded them for robes of flesh. And that's certainly what I did in my life. I got in that fraternity and started looking around, and I thought, okay, well, who's popular? Because I want to be included. I want to be liked. You know, I always wanted to be the funniest. I wanted to have girls like me. I wanted to have plenty of friends. I wanted to be, you know, the guy that everybody wanted to be like. And so I looked at that group, and I started to do what they did. They started to binge drink. You know, they binge drank a lot. They did drugs. They were promiscuous with women. And so I thought, okay, well, that's what I'll do too. So pretty quickly, I was drinking all the time in my life. I started experimenting with drugs. Before you know it, started off with Percocet and Valium and Xanax and things like that, stuff you could find in medicine cabinets. And then I tried LSD. Then I moved to ecstasy. And then I made the worst mistake I ever made in my life on a Sunday afternoon. I was over at a friend's house, one of the guys that lived off campus, some of the guys we were running around with. And I went over there to watch football on a Sunday. I didn't go to church, so I got up, slept in, picked up a six-pack, went over to his house to watch football and grill out and eat all day. So we're sitting there drinking and smoking pot and doing this stuff all day, and it rolled around to be about 5:30 in the afternoon. And I realized, man, I got to go to work tomorrow. The one thing I did in the middle of this, I always took my job seriously. It was really how I paid for all my other good times and everything else I was doing. So I was sitting there on the couch, and I just got up to leave, and I realized I was pretty drunk. I was pretty messed up. I didn't need to drive. Now, Memphis has never been the taxi capital of the world, and there wasn't Uber and Lyft and bird scooters and all those things then. So I started to look around to see if I could find some of my buddies in the house that might want to take me home, you know, or at least drive my car home. One of them follow me, and I'd have my car in the morning. So I got out and I started looking around. I went outside where we'd been grilling out. They weren't there. I went to the front porch. They weren't there. I started walking to the back of the house, and they weren't in the first two bedrooms. And finally, at the end of the hall, I heard some noise. I heard some voices. The door was kind of cracked, so I opened it. And when I did, I looked over, and the guys were leaned over a chest of drawers, and there were lines of cocaine across it. Now, I'd never seen cocaine, never been around it. And oddly enough, out of all the drugs I'd tried, alarm bells started going off. I started remembering all those. Some of you are my age or close, all the He-Man cartoons and the after-school specials that would always show, don't do drugs, and the more you know, and all that. Those kind of flashed through my head, and I turned to leave. I thought, you know what, I'm not going to do this because that's the one you're not going to come back from. And I made it about 3 steps down the hallway. One of the guys came out of the room. He said, hey, where do you think you're going? I said, you know what, minding my own business. I'm going to go back out here on the couch. And he goes, hey, we've been doing this forever. We just didn't tell you because we didn't trust you. And I said, that's okay, minding my own business. He said, well, you need to come in here. Hey, you said you need to drive home. This will wake you up. If you do one of these, it's like drinking 4 or 5 cups of coffee. It'll wake you up. Now, I'd had 1 sip of coffee in my life. It was my dad's black coffee when I was 4. I thought it was disgusting, and I've not had any ever since in 43 years. So I didn't know what that would feel like, but I knew one thing. I had been so lonely and isolated when my group of friends went away that I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't want to be without people. I didn't want to be on my own and just work at school and work in school. My heart longed for community, longed for communion. And so, against my better judgment, because I was inebriated, I walked back in, I took a line of cocaine, and immediately I regretted it. I felt like I could run through a wall. My eyes like just blew open. My pupils were huge. I was sweating. I felt like my heart was blowing out of my chest. I walked back to the front of the house. I sat down and just sat there for about 20 or 30 minutes, just rubbing my arms and looking around and paranoid and freaking out. And after about an hour, I got up and it started to wear off. And I got in the car to go home. All the way home, I told myself, I'm not going to do this again. Right? And I'm telling you all this, folks, this story that I just kind of jumped into, because I want you to know who I am and where I've been. Right? I mean, Pope Paul VI said, if you're going to be a great teacher, first be a great witness. And so why, as you're here on a Friday night, should you listen to a guy like me? Because I've been through experiences and Jesus has pulled me out of them. And so I've encountered Christ, and then he has changed my life, and through him, been able to do some good work for him. So I get in the car that night, I'm leaving, I'm driving home, and I had about a 15-minute drive, and the whole way home, I was like, I'll never do that again. I'll never hang out with those guys again. I'm going to lose their numbers. I started making what my good friend, Dr. Bob Schutz, I had worked with him, I have the blessing of working with him in the John Paul II Healing Center, as well with Sister Miriam James Heidland and all the folks that work there. But he says a lot of times we make unholy vows. Things like, I'll never be like my mother. I'll never act like my father. I'll never this. And we make those vows, and we don't even realize that the devil's like, oh, really? Let's just see about that. And he gets there and he roots around. Right? And we build these strongholds to protect those things, and the devil just has free reign in there. And so I made all those unholy vows, and they didn't even last a week. That next Friday night, the same guys called me and said, hey, man, you get off work, come over to Dave's house. This is a different house. We're going to go over here, and we're going to have a few beers, and we're going to go downtown to Beale Street. Memphis is Bourbon Street, right? We're going to go looking for ladies and listen to music. We're going to have a good time. And we had done that a lot before the drugs. And I said, sure, I'll do that. So I go over to Dave's house. I knock on the front door. Next thing you know, they open the door. And this time it's not in some back bedroom. It's all over the coffee table, and a lot of it. And I thought, again, I should leave. I told my parents I'd never do anything like that. I never would do that. I need to go. But again, as I started to turn, the devil started to whisper in my ear, you're going to be alone. You're not going to have any friends. You hate that. Go in there and do what you need to do to have community. And so I went in, I sat down, I took a line of cocaine, and I took a lot of lines of cocaine that night. We never even left his house. We did cocaine till about 6:30 in the morning that night. Slept the next day in the mornings about half the day, got up, went back and did it again. That second night, I said, you know what? As I went home that Sunday morning when I should have been going to church, I said, I'll never do it again. Right? I started making more of those vows. I'll never do it again. I'll never have the dealer's number. I'll never buy it myself. I'll never do it on a school night or a work night. Pretty soon all those fell. Pretty soon I had the dealer's number. Pretty soon I was buying it on my own, doing it on my own. My grades started to suffer. I started to party all the time, and pretty soon my dad came to me and said, son, I'm not going to support this. I'm not going to pay for this. I'm not going to help you with college anymore. He was paying for it, and I would pay him back. He said, you're getting zeros on everything. And until you get your life figured out, you can just work, and I'm not supporting it. So I dropped out of school after about 1.5 years. Still lived in the fraternity house, still partying, all that. Well, eventually, we broke away from the fraternity, me and the guys that were doing the cocaine. I started to do it more and more, but at the same time, I started to move up in my career. You know, I was loading trucks and stocking parts in a warehouse. And when I dropped out of school, I started taking it more seriously. I moved up in the warehouse. I became the warehouse manager. I was making $40,000 a year living in a fraternity house, which was like being rich. I had a car. I could pay for everything for everybody. And so I had a lot of friends, I thought, for the right reasons. And so I start living this life, and I'm just have all this money, and next thing you know, I just keep moving up. They put me in an executive management training program. I wind up running some auto parts stores, and then I wind up as an outside salesman. By the time I was 24 years old, I was making $300,000 a year. I was really, really good at my job. I was the number one salesman in a Fortune 250 company for many, many years. And so I'm living this life where it's like, man, this guy's got everything. At first, my friends would give me a bunch of guff because I dropped out of school, but then they were also jealous because I was super successful, and so there was this tension there, and we started to move away from each other. I started to isolate. I was Johnny on the spot from 8 to 5 every day. I'd go and just kill it all day long, and then when I got home, all I did was party, drinking and do drugs all the time. I started developing other addictions. I started watching things I shouldn't watch and got addicted to those things. Started lying all the time. And from the outside looking in, I looked like I had the tiger by the tail. I had everything anybody says that you should have or want. Money, house, cars, great family, all that kind of stuff. But I was a broken mess inside. I was a chameleon among men. I could be anything to anybody. I wore more masks than most people have on a hat rack. Right, I was this guy at the bar, and this guy at the gym, and this guy with my family, and this guy with these friends, and it was just a miserable, miserable life, and I was always afraid somebody was going to find out. I had no real relationship with Jesus at all because I'd walked away from the church, and so my relationship with Jesus was what a lot of people's relationship is like. Oh man, I'm in trouble. Let me get my Jesus genie lamp off the shelf, blow the dust off of it, rub it, and go, Jesus, can you do me a favor? Can you help me out in this situation? Can you put somebody in my life? And that's what I prayed for all the time. Because I got out of the fraternity, I got away from the girls. I was very lonely. I was hoping that somebody would want to marry me and that I could have a family. And honestly, I was hoping that my life would change magically if I met somebody. Right? I thought, well, maybe like St. Paul says, it'll be time to put away childish things. So I prayed about that, and I prayed about that in the way that I did, and one night Jesus answered it. I was going out with some buddies. We were getting back together. It had been a while since all of us had been together. We went out to a sports bar in East Memphis, and I made sure to bring some cocaine with me in case anybody wanted to have old times again, good times again. My old sister was with me. She'd gone off to college in East Tennessee, and she was home that weekend, a rare weekend when she came home. So she was kind of palling around with me. We walk in this bar, and we're sitting there. It's about 6 o'clock in the evening. Now, generally, we were out all night. All of a sudden, a bunch of my buddies were like, you know what? A lot of us are married now. We got people waiting on us. So a bunch of guys started leaving at about 7:15. I was going, well, wait a minute. What are we doing? Like, everybody's leaving. I thought we were going to have a good time. I thought we were going to get together. I got all these drugs. They're not going to do themselves. What are we going to do all this? And so a bunch of them got up and left, and I was sitting there with two other guys who were talking about leaving. Well, about this time, a beautiful girl walked into the bar. And she'd actually dated one of my best friends, one of the guys I did drugs with a lot for a long time, for 5 years. I thought they were going to get married. I was actually there the night they broke up on Beale Street, but I was there a lot of nights they broke up. But they stayed broken up that time for 5 years. I hadn't seen her, but in passing a couple times lately, and when I'd spoken to her, she looked at me like she didn't know who the heck I was. Now, I'd put on weight, and, I had hair then, and probably a bad goatee, but she acted like she didn't know me. Well, she walked in the bar that night. She said hi to my other two friends, didn't say hi to me, which really kind of made me angry because I was like, I know you know who I am. And I sat down talking to them. She sat at her table. Well, all of a sudden, this friend of my little sister's came over and said, hey, John, this girl at the table wants to talk to you. And I thought, who, where? That never happened anymore, right? I was full on looking everywhere and scrambling. And she pointed at Angela, this girl. And I said, Angela, I know her. I've known her for years. She dated one of my best friends for years. She said, I don't think that she knows that. I don't think she knows who you are. I said, yes, she does. I've said hi to her a bunch lately. She goes, I don't think so. She goes back to the table, talks to Angela. She comes back. She goes, she wants you to come over. Now, here I was. I've been praying to God privately to put a woman in my life for a year probably, every single night, because I was mired down in my addiction to pornography and everything else, and I wanted a real person to give my life to. And so I go over to the table, and you think with all that praying I would have practiced my lines and my moves. But I walked up to the table and I said very smoothly, "What do you want?" And she looked at me and said, "Hi, John." And I said, "Hey, what do you want?" Because my mind was on partying and drugs and everything else, and disappointed the night was going away. And I said, "What do you want?" She goes, "I just wanted to talk to you." So I look over, my buddies are over there doing their thing, and I sat down and never even realized that she was interested in me. And so we get to talking, and we're talking, and finally my buddies that are left came over, and they said, "Hey, we're about to go to another bar." And I said, "I'll go with you." And they said, "No, you need to stay." I said, "Why would I stay? Everybody left that I know except you two, and you're leaving now. I'm going to go with you." And they said, "You need to stay." And I said, "Why would I stay? Like, I'm going with you guys, and I have the drugs. You're going to want those." And then finally one of my buddies goes, "You need to stay." And I went, "What's wrong with your neck?" Like, I just was not picking up on anything. Finally, I look over at my wife, or future wife. I look over at Angela, and she has these big doe eyes, and I realized she was interested in me. And I sat down, and I thought, "Oh, buddy, my best friend's going to be so mad, like when he finds out about us spending time together." But we sat there, and we had one of those beautiful conversations I'd ever had in my life. I never met anybody like her, and I couldn't believe she was interested in me. And so we sat there till 9 or 10 o'clock. My buddies left. I walked her outside. I said, "Can I take you out tomorrow night?" And she said, "Yes." So the next night, I took her to the movies. We dated for a year, and then we got married. Now, along the way, she told me the man that she was going to marry was going to be Catholic. I was a non-practicing Baptist anymore, so I thought, what the heck? If I get to marry you, I'll do whatever you want. So I went to the nearest RCIA class and chivalrously gave up my faith I didn't practice anymore for hers. But I never took it seriously. I was really good in the scriptures. They made us memorize them when we were little. I read the Bible 5 or 6 times before I was 15 in the Baptist church. So I blew through all the RCIA at the time, now OCIA. They said, "We don't worship Mary, we don't worship statues," all that. I said, "Okay, good with that." But I never took it seriously. And I never told Angela I struggled with drugs. Whenever I was around her, I only did enough to where it would satiate me, but she wouldn't be able to tell anything about how much I'd done or what I was doing. I was doing small amounts. And I kept saying, "I'm going to tell her, I'm just going to quit. Life's going to happen to me. Life's going to happen to me." I was doing cocaine till 7 in the morning the night before I got married. We get married that day. You know, we're young and single, so Angela saw me drinking, and we had a social life, but she never knew about the drugs, and I didn't tell her. About a year after we'd been married, she comes to me and she says, "John, I'm pregnant." And I thought, yes, like finally, I'm going to be a dad, and I can't wait, and I'm going to be a more present dad than my dad ever was for me. My dad worked 2 jobs to support us and to send us to schools, for where we lived in Memphis wasn't the greatest area. And so they paid a lot of money to send us to nice schools, to private schools. And so he wasn't around. You know, he wasn't around hardly at all. And when he was, he didn't really want much to do with me. And so I said, "I'm going to be a better dad than he ever was, and I can't wait. And good gosh, I hope it's a boy, because I don't know what to do with a girl," and all those things. But then I thought, wait a minute, I was doing a lot of drugs when we created Jacob, right? When we conceived. What if something's wrong with him? I need to tell Angela. And I tried to, but I was a coward. You see, when you're addicted and when you're struggling, we're all innately selfish from the fall anyway. A consequence of the fall. We're all, have all fallen short of the glory of God. We've all sinned. We all are selfish in some way, whether we want to admit it or not. And when you're addicted to something, it just throws that selfishness into another gear. And so I was more worried about keeping the lifestyle I had hidden than telling the truth. And so I didn't tell her. Thanks be to Jesus Christ, I have a beautiful, wonderful, handsome, amazing, perfectly healthy 16-year-old boy named Jacob. He's the light of my life. But sadly, I wasn't a very good father for a very long time in my life. I was a good one when I wanted to be, but see, as I continued in my sales career, I just kept getting more and more customers. I was a 100% commission sales guy. And we moved into another house and had all these bills and all this pressure. And so I just kept getting better and better at what I did. I kept focusing more and more, and money and power and esteem and affirmation became everything that was important to me. Because as men, we're told, put your head down, never complain, work hard, don't have feelings, don't have emotions. What are emotions? You have feelings? What are feelings? Just work hard, don't tell anybody. If you need somebody, you're not a man. And I subscribed to that whole way of life, and I lived that way for a long time. So Jacob's born healthy. I'm a good dad when I want to be, but not very often. I'm more concerned with work and money and power and affirmation and all those things. Well, my mother came to us, and my mother had been in remission for breast cancer for about 5 years. She came to my sisters and I and their husbands and my wife and I, and she said, I haven't been feeling good lately. I went to the doctor, and it looks like the cancer's back. She said, I'm going to get back on chemo, and she did. So a couple months later, she said, I still don't feel really well, and they don't think it's the chemo. So I'm going to the heart doctor, and she did. Well, the heart doctor told her she had 3 blockages in her heart and that she could have a heart attack at any moment. And so she had a decision in front of her with my father. Either stay on the chemo and risk having a heart attack at any moment, or have the surgery and then try to go back on the chemo, but that was going to take a while and the cancer could spread. So her and my father, they prayed about it, talked about it, and decided to have the heart surgery. So that had gone on. It had been a few months. I was working one day in Memphis and below there in Mississippi in my sales territory. And my parents had retired to Mississippi at that time, back where they were from. They had tore down my mother's parents' house. She was an only child. It was an old house. And they built a big retirement house so all of us and our children and families could come for Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and all those things to spend together. So they were down there most of the time, but they were trying to sell their house in Memphis. So they kept all their doctors in Memphis because they were back and forth all the time. My mother was going to the West Cancer Clinic there in Memphis. So I'm driving along one day, and I never had anything to do with my mother's treatments. My sisters always handled that. I avoided it. I didn't go around it, honestly, because I was scared to lose my mother. I was scared to face it, but honestly, too, I was very selfish. I just figured if I had the ostrich approach, right, I'll just stick my head in the sand, and hopefully things will get better when I pull it back out, and I didn't have to worry about it. So I remember she's going to be at West Clinic that day out of the blue. Looking back now, I know it was the Holy Spirit. And so I was like, what the heck? I'm in between calls. I'll go over there. So I drive over there. I walk in. I said, is Miss Ann Edwards here? And they go, yeah, she's in room 2, whatever. Who are you? I'm her son, because they'd never seen me. So I walk back there. I walk in a room, open the door, and there's my mom was about that big if she was that big. And I just opened the door, and my mother went nuts. She goes, John, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? It's so good to see you. I can't believe you're here. What a surprise. Thank you for coming to see me. Oh, my gosh. And, of course, my dad was his usual emotional self. Son. Yeah, that's about all he could muster with his emotions in his life. And so I go over, I hug my mom. I'm sitting on the medical bed with her, all that thing, the examination bed thing. All of a sudden, the door opens, and the doctor comes in. I recognize her because my sisters talked to me about her. You know, my mom gave information to them, or they went to appointments with her, and then they called me and told me about it. So I recognized it was her doctor based on the red hair and being a pretty woman the way they said she was. And so she takes one look at me and says, you must be John. I've heard a lot about you, but I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances. Next thing you know, she turns away from me and she turns to my mom and she says, Miss Edwards, I'm so sorry. But we knew when you stopped to have the heart surgery and didn't have the chemo that the cancer could move and spread, and it has. It's moved from your breasts into your lymph nodes and your lungs and into your brain. You have 2 weeks to a month to live. First time I ever went to a doctor's appointment with my mother was the day I found out she was going to die. My dad lost his temper immediately. He started screaming, is this a money thing? We can come up with money. And I was doing the same thing. I was like, I got a lot of money. Like, I'll give you however much you need. Like, how do we fix this? And my dad was yelling at the doctor. My mother just kind of looked over and said, Don, stop. And she just looked like this most peaceful angel. She sat on the bed and she said, thank you so much for what you've done for me. I always knew this could happen. You and your people have given me so many more years of life. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I won't get to see you anymore, but I'm so grateful I got to know you. And I was like, what? Like, that's how we're ending this? Like, this is what's going to happen? Nobody's going to care to second opinion or do anything else? And so my mother looked at me and my father and said, let's go. So they get in their car, or starting to, and I walk over and go, what am I supposed to do? Like, you want me to go back to work? Like, what am I supposed to do right now? And Mom and Dad just said, follow us to the house in Midtown. We're going to get clothes and go down to the farm. And so I did. I followed him over there. My dad got out of the car and slammed the door and started for the house, and I didn't want any part of that. So I walked over to passenger side of the car and opened the door, and I just fell into my mother's lap, all 6'8" and 275 pounds. I mean, I'm surprised I didn't crush her. But every time I walked in a room in my life, I always went and fell in her lap. Dr. Bob told me the other day, it's because what you were looking for from your dad, you never got, so you look for a double portion in your mom. And so I was sitting there, and she just started rubbing my head, and I was like, Mom, this can't happen, this can't happen, this isn't fair, this isn't right. What do you mean you're going to die? This can't be real. We got to do something. Jacob's not even a year old. He's not going to know you. I need you. You don't know what's going on in my life. You don't know what's happening. Like, I'm struggling so much, and I have been for years, and I wanted to tell you things, and I'm so afraid, and I'm struggling. And all I did, looking back at a woman who just found out she was going to die, I sat there in her face and said, I. My whole life had been about me. And so I'm just crying and trying not to cry because I'm a man and men don't cry. And I started saying all these things, and my mother just sat there rubbing my head. I like to tell people that's why I'm bald. She rubbed all my hair off in the car that day. And she said, John, here's the truth. I love Jesus and he loves me. And I've known him my whole life. And my parents knew him, and I'm going to go be with them, and I'm going to have a life that I've always dreamt of with the Lord, and I'm going to have my eyes on you, and I'll be there for you. And I was like, I don't want to hear that mess. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Like, Jesus has plenty of people up there. Jesus could take anybody he wants. Why is he taking you? I need you. And she said, John, everything's going to be all right. And my dad came out of the house, threw the stuff in the car, got in, slammed the door. I stepped up out of the car, and I said, what am I supposed to do? Again, for the second time in an hour. And she said to me, please call your sisters and tell them what's happened, which was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life. So I get home, and before I left my parents' house, I walked up to this house I'd lived in for 20-something years of my life. As they drove off, I ran up and I kicked the porch as hard as I could, and I just looked up at the sky and I screamed, I hate you, God. I hate you. Like, I don't get this. My mother has been an epitome of a servant for you. She's loved you impeccably. I have not. I'm a liar, drug addict, scumbag, loser. I've lied to my whole family. No one really knows me. My whole life is just a waste. And you're going to take somebody like her and leave somebody like me here, a scumbag, drug addict, lying loser? If that's the kind of guy you are, the kind of God you are, I will never worship you again in my life. And I meant every word of it. I went home, and my sisters had called my wife, and I guess told them to be ready for me to come in and be a mess. My wife tried to hug me, and I started crying, and I pushed her away because men don't cry and men don't need anybody or anything. My whole life turned upside down. I started doing $40 or $50 worth of cocaine a night. I started drinking 20 or 30 beers a night. My wife and I became like ships passing in the night. I was angry all the time. I would go in the shower in the morning and turn on music so loud nobody could hear me, and I'd beat the towels in the shower and scream and get it out, and then go be Johnny on the job all day long with a smile on my face till 4:30 or 5, and I'd start that cycle over again and again. Well, one day my wife came to me and she goes, John, I'm pregnant. And it really surprised me because we were really like two ships passing in the night. And so she works at St. Jude. I said, well, great, maybe this is my chance. I didn't get it right when I married you, and I didn't get it right when Jacob was born, and maybe with this kid I'll get it right. Maybe life will happen to me. Maybe the third time's the charm. Well, she works at St. Jude Children's Hospital in the radiology department. She's now in research and runs that department, but back then she had a friend in ultrasound. So she went downstairs one day to get an ultrasound and called me and said, guess what? I had the ultrasound. And I go, yeah, that's great. How's it looking? She goes, there's 2 heartbeats. I said, yeah, yours and the baby's. She goes, no, that'd be 3. And I panicked. I was like, we can barely pay for the one we have, and now we're going to have 3? And what are we going to do about daycare? Which is not things you need to say to your wife when she announces that she's pregnant. How are we going to pay for this? Not a good thing to do, fellas, if you haven't had a child yet. And, just stay away from that. But I come home, I apologize to her. I'm like, sorry, it just blew my mind. And again, I'm wanting to tell her. Because she found out her aunt had a stroke, and they found out it was some kind of disorder that she had that was hereditary that threw blood clots. And so Angela got checked out, and she had the same thing. So every week of that pregnancy with twins, she had to go to the doctor. She had to go to a checkup every single week. So things were hard, and I knew I should tell her. I was like, man, what if something happens? I've been doing drugs more than ever. I've been drinking more than ever, doing all this stuff. But I was a coward again. I was afraid. I was afraid she'd leave me and she'd take everything. She'd take the house, the car, the money, the kids, my reputation, everything. That's what my whole life had become about. We searched for power in our life, right? We lost it in the fall, and I could speak for men here that we have misconceptions of power. Like if I have money and cars and muscles and fame and fortune and all this stuff, then I'll feel whole in it. It never fills that hole. So we grasp at those things for power, hoping that we'll stick a round peg in a round hole. But it always winds up being a square one, and it never fills us up. And so I didn't tell Angela. I was afraid, and praise be Jesus Christ. I have two beautiful, red-haired, blue-eyed, identical twin girls. They're healthy as a horse. But I went off the rails after that. Angela started taking care of the kids. I was staying up every night till 2 a.m. doing drugs and watching porn and doing all that stuff. Angela and I, we just started to fight all the time. I was never physically violent with her, but I was certainly verbally violent to her. You know, I would just put her down. She would suspect something, and I'd tell her if she was going to give me a drug test and she didn't trust me, I'd leave. It was horrible what I did to her. And so one night I was sitting there on the couch at 2 a.m. doing drugs and drinking. I thought, well, I better go to bed. I might get 1 hour of sleep on all these drugs. It's what I'd become accustomed to. So I got up, I went to the back, I took a shower, laid down on the bed, and it is impossible to go to sleep on cocaine. Whether it's 1 line or 40, you can't go to sleep. It's like somebody sticks toothpicks in your eyelids and you can't shut them. But for whatever reason that night, I laid down on the bed, and 5 minutes after being in there, I fell asleep. About 5 minutes later, I sat up in the bed, and my heart felt like it was blowing out of my chest. And I thought, no, this is it. I'm going to have a heart attack. I've done too much. I threw the covers off me. I rolled out of bed and landed on the floor on all fours. I had the wherewithal to look back at my wife to think, I hope she didn't wake up in the midst of this, and she didn't. I crawled to the restroom, I shut the lid of the commode, and I pulled myself up on it, and I sat there just shaking and quivering and feeling my heart feel like it was going to explode. And I kept going, no, this is it, I'm going to die. And I felt myself wanting to call out to my wife to tell her to call an ambulance, but I knew if she did, they'd take my blood, and they'd see the drugs, and she'd find out, and she'd leave me. And so I thought I'd rather die right here on this floor than to tell her the truth. If I die, I won't have to deal with it, and then it won't be my problem anymore. That's how selfish I was. That's how much of a coward I was. That's how addicted I was. And so there's this towel hanging in front of me in the bathroom, and I grabbed this towel and I put it up against my face, and I'm just like, if I'm going to die, at least I'll die quietly. So I just shoved my face in it, and I started waiting to die, and all of a sudden my breathing slowed. And I realized I was having a panic attack. I'd never had one in my life. So my breathing slowed, and I got up, and I thought, man, I'll never do that again. And I'll throw the drugs out in the morning. I went back in bed and fell asleep. Got up the next morning, threw the drugs out. I was back buying them at 4:30 the next afternoon. Same thing, 2 a.m, drinking, doing drugs, Angela and the kids long ago in bed. I watched the pornography I watched every night, go back, take a shower, get in the bed, fall asleep in 5 minutes, wake up again, boom, 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 boom. Heart blowing out of my chest, fall out of the bed, look back, she didn't wake up again, crawl into the bathroom, put the lid down. I'm sitting there again going, no. And I wanted to call out to God, but I hated him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. I didn't want to ask him for help. I was so mad at him for my mother dying. And I hadn't gotten over it, obviously. And so I sat there and I was like, what am I going to do? This is strike 2. I don't know if I'll get a strike 3. What am I going to do? How am I going to change my life? And I thought, you know what? My father-in-law, who was uber Catholic, by the way, he took me to a men's conference and he asked me for years, and I always got out of it until Angela got really mad one time and told me, if you don't go to this thing with my dad, there's going to be a lot of trouble. And so I went to one. It was a men's conference in Memphis, and Father Larry Richards was speaking then, very famous priest. And he showed up and he yelled at everybody and told everybody there weren't men if they weren't the husbands and fathers they needed to be. And he really kind of broke some light into my life at that point. I got up to leave that day, and he shoved a book in my chest, and he said, this is my book, Be a Man. Now, no names, didn't know him. This is my book, Be a Man. I wrote in there, for you on the front page, be a saint or go to hell, is what he wrote on the first page. So I took it home that night, and I was like, I'm going to change my life. This was in 2011. I'm in the bathroom in 2016. So I went home that night with that book in 2011. I read the first 3 pages, underlining, thought I was going to change my life, and I was back to doing the cocaine 3 hours later. So here I was 5 years down the road, way further into the pits of hell than I'd ever been. And I'm sitting in that bathroom, and I thought, you know what? All I want to do is tell somebody the truth of what happened in my life. Like, people ask me all the time, what's the worst part of being addicted? Is it withdrawal? That's not fun at all, I'll tell you that much. But the worst part is lying, because you never remember what you told anybody. And you have to lie again and again and again and again, and you build this house of cards that's all lies. And so people come up to you all day like, hey, John, you remember when you said this the other day? What did I say? What did I say? Oh, gosh, I got to remember, because if I say something different, then maybe they'll suspect, and everybody will know. Like, that's the hell an addict's life is when they're trying to hide those things. And so I thought, at that men's conference, they have like 40 priests there hearing confessions. And if I remember right, I've only been to confession once in 11 years of being a Catholic, because I never went to Mass. I fought Angela on it. I didn't participate in the sacraments. I didn't believe it was Jesus in the Eucharist. I just did it to marry her. So I went to confession one time when I had to in RCIA, but it had been 11 years. But I thought, you know what, if I remember right, you can go in there and you can tell the priest stuff, and they can't tell anybody. So maybe at least I'll go in there and get it off my chest and feel better, and I'll just stop. So I told Angela, tell your dad I'll go with him to the conference. So I go that weekend. I don't even remember who's speaking, but I show up, and it becomes time in the middle of the morning to go to confession, and I start doing the walk of shame down the hallway. 40 different priests. I'm like, no, I know him, and no, Angela knows him, and my father-in-law knows him, and so-and-so knows them, and I finally get to the door number 41. And it said Batesville, Mississippi, which isn't even in our diocese. I don't even know why this priest was there. I guess I do. He was there for me, I guess. And so I'm like, I'll just choose door number 41, because he's not going to know anybody to tell him what I'm going to tell him, because I didn't trust anybody. I certainly didn't trust the seal of confession either. Not a lot at the time. And so I opened the door, and when I walked in, I immediately wished I'd picked another door. Here was this angry-looking, older, crotchety-looking priest just looking right at me like that. And it was a face-to-face confession. So the chair's about 2 feet from him, and he says, sit. And so I come in, I'm like, oh, man, I wish I'd picked door number 13 or 31 or whatever. And I sit down, and I realize I don't even know how to go to confession. And so he looks at me, and he says, begin. And I said, begin. And he goes, begin. And I said, begin. I swear I'm not making that up. I said, begin. I didn't know what I was doing. He goes, do you not know what you're doing? I said, no, sir, I don't. I've never been to confession. I've been to confession one time in my life, 11 years ago. And he went, he was just freaking out. And all of a sudden he goes, repeat after me. So I start repeating after him, and I'm thinking, I'm just going to tell him enough to feel better. Well, next thing you know, I was telling him everything I did from the time I was 4 years old till I was 37 years old. And when I got into all the stuff I've been telling y'all, I started ugly snot crying. My heart started falling out in front of him. And he looked like he was getting hit with body blows. Like everything I told him, he's just like, man, I wish he'd pick door number 12 or door number 13 or door number 41. Poor guy, he probably heard 30 confessions, and here I come in with this humdinger of a life. And so I keep going. I'm like, I just want to be different. I just want to be a better man. I just want to change my life. I want to be the husband and father my wife and kids always deserved. But I don't want to get in trouble. And man, when I said that, he lost it. What do you mean you don't want to get in trouble? You're going to come in here and tell Jesus how he's going to deliver his mercy to you? You don't get to do that. If you're not going to take this seriously, then you've wasted my time and yours. I'm not giving you absolution. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. I can't cry anymore. I'm already crying as much as I can. And the last time I did this, Jesus was much nicer than you. I don't understand what's going on. And so I said, look, I'll take you seriously. Like, I'm sorry. I'm so scared of where my life is right now, and I just need mercy. And so he gave me absolution. And for the first time in my life, I felt the Spirit of God in my heart again. I felt the Holy Spirit in my heart. I went home that Saturday evening. I poured out the drugs. I poured out the booze. Went to church the next morning with Angela. I was up before everybody, had everybody in the car. Yeah, and I made it 4 days. The next week was Holy Week, which didn't mean a lot in my life at that time. But I was making a sales call on a Thursday, and a customer of mine called me. I'd put in a bid on a bunch of equipment for his new shop he was adding on to his shop. So he had like $400,000 worth of lifts and computers and all this stuff he needed and scan tools. And he was going to buy it from me. He called me that day, and he said, John, congratulations, I'm buying it from you. Come down here, bring me an invoice, and congratulations. So I shot down into Mississippi, printed an invoice, took it over there. He signed it, and I thought, I'm going to make more money on this sale than I made all year long. This is going to be the best year I ever had. I just want to celebrate. So what that meant for me was drinking and doing drugs. And I remember you just told Jesus you were going to change your life. You wouldn't do this anymore. I thought, well, he forgave me once, right? Just this one time. So I called the dealer all the way into Memphis. I'm supposed to be going to the other side to Germantown to pick up my son, Jacob, from my father-in-law's house. I called the dealer about 30 times. He didn't answer, and I get off on the exit for my father-in-law's, and he calls back and says, come on back. I'll give you double what I normally give you for the same price. And I whipped that car around and shot 20 minutes back the other way over by Elvis Presley's Graceland. It's not in a nice part of town. Pulled up the guy's house, ran in, got my $40 worth of cocaine. He gave me about $80 worth of cocaine for that money. I jumped in my car and I drove down the street, pulled over in a gas station to get some gas. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, I heard whoop, whoop. And I looked behind me and the DEA was behind me. They'd been watching his house, the Drug Enforcement Agency. Next thing you know, they pull me out of the car in my Napa uniform and they got me handcuffed and thrown up against my car. They found the drugs in my sock. They throw me in the back of a Tahoe and I'm bleeding from the handcuffs and sliding from side to side all the way downtown. Take me to the organized crime unit, chain me to a bench. I sat there for 3 hours while they asked me questions, thinking that my wife's going to be so worried she's not going to know what happened to me. I was supposed to pick up Jacob. I never showed up. She's probably called 1,000,000 times. Finally, they sent a patrol officer in to get me, and he said, I'm taking you to jail in downtown Memphis. We call it 201 Poplar. That's the address. One of the worst jails in the United States. And so they throw me in the car, and I'm worried to death. I'm handcuffed, and they're fighting because they were about to get off work, and one of them took the call thinking it'd be quick. But we pull up to the jail, and there's about 45 Memphis police cars in line to drop people off. So immediately one of them was mad at the other one for, we're going to be here for 3 hours. Great call. Thanks for picking up that radio. Then they turned their attention on me. This is your fault. We should be home right now, our families, idiots like you and all this stuff. And I said, I know, I'm sorry, I made mistakes. And the guy goes, you don't look like you've ever been in trouble in your life. What's your deal? I said, I hadn't. I got addicted to something in college, and I've just been stupid and been so broken, and I've been turning to that instead of other things. And I'm so worried about my wife. She's got to be worried sick. And the guy says, well, we're not going anywhere because of you. Your phone's in the trunk. I can't uncuff you, but I can dial the phone and put it to your ear if you want to tell her where you are. I remember looking in the rearview mirror, and I said, well, I don't know what I would say. I'll never forget his eyes. I can still see him today in the rearview mirror. And he said, is this about her or is it about you? My whole life had been about me. I said, get the phone. So he gets the phone, he puts it to my ear, and she answers on the first ring, John, where are you? Angela, I'm in the back of a police car on my way into 201 Poplar. I've been arrested for the possession of cocaine with intent to sell because they'd given me extra and it increased over that mark, so it was now a felony. And she said, I hate you. I knew it was something else besides your mother. I knew you've been lying to me. Don't call me again. She hung up the phone. I was worried about what I was going to have to do when I got in jail, so at least she knew, and I got out of the car. They took all my stuff. I went into the drunk tank. I saw a guy stab another guy within about 5 minutes. A bailiff beat that guy within an inch of his life. I sit there till 4 in the morning, starving, hadn't slept, hadn't eaten in 24 hours. Finally, they called me over for mug shots, and I'm thinking, this is getting real. Like, people are going to know, people are going to find out. They call me back, and they give me the scrubs and toilet paper and blankets and a toothbrush that I could have, and they tell me to line up to go to the cell. And I was scared to death I was going to be in there with somebody. I was exhausted, and I didn't want to be in there having to keep my eyes open all night. So we go down this cell block, and I'm the very last cell, and I'm holding everything I can have in my life. And they tell me to wait. The door opens. I go in, turn around, and I watch this cell door just slowly shut. Boom, 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 boom. And then the lock hits, and I thought, that's it. My life's over. For the first time since I was a kid, I can't go anywhere if I want. If I want to go to the bathroom, it's in front of God and everybody. If I want to eat, I can't. And I just started to look at what I'd done with my life. And so I took the 2 blankets I had. I turned around. I was by myself. I looked at the bunk beds, and they were disgusting. I threw one of them down, the blankets, and I laid down face first, and I pulled the blanket, the other one over my head. And by the grace of God, I passed out. I woke up the next morning, and I was still under that blanket, and I thought, or later that morning, because it was already 4 in the morning, But I thought I was in my own bed. I thought I was having a dream until I sat up and my head hit the bottom of a steel bunk bed. All of a sudden, I threw my legs over the side, and here I am, a 6'8" guy in an 8x8 cell. First time in my life I ever realized I was claustrophobic. The cinder block wall seemed like it was just coming in and in and in, and I started shaking and feeling that heart attack feeling again. People were screaming at me what they're going to do to me, all this stuff. I started rubbing 9-0 again. No, 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 this can't be real, this can't be real. I thought it was a nightmare. I can't believe I've done this to my life. No, 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 no. Angela's going to find out. She's going to leave me in here. I'll never get out of here. She's going to take the kids, the house, the money, the car, the reputation, all of that. No, 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 no. And then all of a sudden, I just started to think, well, what am I going to do? I don't have any other choice. I just need to take my life. I need to take my life. I'll never come back from this. There's no way ever. I'm going to lose everything, and I don't want to live anymore. And so I looked around the cell for something to take my life, and I couldn't find it. Thank God. And so I sat back down, and I started shaking again, and then all of a sudden this feeling of peace came over me. I'd never felt anything like it in my life, and I was like, why do I feel calm all of a sudden? And from my own gut, the truest words I'd ever said in my life came out of my mouth. I said, at least now I don't have to lie anymore. At least now everybody will know who I am. And it was like the weight of the world fell off me, because that was my biggest fear. I know someday this house of cards is going to crumble, and I'm not going to be in charge of that. And what's going to happen when it does? So all of a sudden this peace came over me, and then I felt the presence of Jesus Christ enter the cell. I didn't see an apparition. I didn't see Jonathan Rumi or Jim Caviezel or anybody like that. But I just felt the presence of Jesus in that cell, and I just heard myself again say, how did I? He said, it was the day you walked away from me. It's the day you started to choose and look for other things to satiate you besides me. It's when you started to turn to your unhealthy self-reliance, unholy self-reliance, that this started to happen. And so I remembered all the terrible things I said to him and to God the Father, all the curse words and the middle fingers and the I hate yous and all that stuff that I'd given God over the years. And I hit my knees, and I felt so sorry. I hit my knees. It had been so long since I prayed. I didn't even know how to, but I hit my knees and I just said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be like this. I don't even know how I got like this. I was just trying to get through life. I was just trying to make it. I felt so alone. I felt so lonely. I'm sorry for walking away from you. I've ruined my life. Look what it's worth. It's not worth anything. Please take it. Just take it. I don't want control anymore. Please just help me become the husband and father I always should have been. My wife and kids don't deserve this. They never deserve this. And please, if you'll just help me, I'll give you my life. It's not worth anything. You can control it. You can have it. Please give me a chance to be with them. But if that's not in your will, then please give them someone better than me. The only other words I said after that is, I surrender. I give up. I surrender. You can have my life. I didn't commit suicide that day, but it turns out I did die that day. I was sitting in a jail cell. I got up. I sat on the bed, and Jesus sat there with me, and he started showing me all these things I'd done when I was little. Evangelization trips, mission trips, church camps in the summer, vacation Bible schools, and how I was always joyful at that point in my life. Not because of what I had or what I did, but because of whose I was. I was his, and I knew it. And my whole life was about him. And he was like, you can have that again. You can have that again. But you have to mean what you say. You have to give me your life. So a few minutes later, I told him again, I give you my life. The bailiff comes and says, hey, you can make a phone call or you can take a shower. I said, I'll take the phone call. So I tried to make a phone call. There was no headset on the thing on the wall. I didn't know how to use it. You couldn't hear anything. It was excruciating to have a lifeline and not even be able to use it. And an inmate stuck an empty roll of toilet paper in right in front of my face and said, put this to your ear, you'll be able to hear, and you'll be able to dial out. It was God again of kindness in a moment where it shouldn't have come. That guy could have shivved me as easy as anything else, and he handed me something to help me. So I called everybody I knew, all those fraternity brothers I spent thousands of dollars on. I was the one with the money, had all these friends. Turned out it was the money they were friends with, not me. Not a single one of them answered the phone. Not a single one of them. pleading, please come get me. I'm so scared. I need to get home and see about my family. Nothing. Nobody answered. Finally, I call my dad's farm again, and my older sister Pam answers. She goes, John, we know where you are. Angela told us she's across the street bailing you out, which I couldn't believe because she's Irish and Italian and she means what she says. So I didn't think she was ever going to have anything to do with me again. My sister said, John, it's Friday. You'll get out here at 9 o'clock as long as she gets that bail in the next hour. She's not going to let you go home except to get clothes. She's going to take the kids and go to her parents, and I'm going to bring you down to Dad's for Easter weekend. I said, Easter weekend? And she goes, yeah, John, it's Good Friday. So I went into jail on Holy Thursday, and I'm coming out on Good Friday. And so I go back to the cell, and I'm going through all these things with Jesus, and I'm believing I can change my life. The bailiff comes back and says, you got visitors. So I'm thinking, well, maybe one of my idiotic fraternity brothers showed up, and they're actually going to do something. I walk in the room from Law and Order with the payphone and the glass, and it isn't them. It's my wife and her mother. And they're crying, and I'm crying. And I started to do what I always did. I went to explain myself, and Angela put her hand up and said, stop. And I thought, this is it. This is it. Like, she's fixing to tell me I'm done with you. Like, we're getting a divorce. You're not going to see your kids. And instead, what she said was, John, stop. You don't get to talk right now. I get to talk. And she said, John, I'm not going to divorce you. I'm not going to leave you. But it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the vows I made to God in the church that day. All I heard was, I'm not going to divorce you. She said, I don't know how we're going to get past this. I don't know how we're going to heal. I'm not going to leave you. I need you to know that so you don't hurt yourself. Your sister's going to come get you tonight. You should get out about 9 o'clock. You can go by the house and get a suit for court on Monday. And then you got to go to your dad's for Easter. And then we'll have to figure out what happens after Monday. She said goodbye. And she got up and left with her mother-in-law. I go back to cell. I pray with Jesus all evening. They let me out. I get my phone. I missed 15 calls from my boss. My work found out. Apparently there's a magazine in Memphis called Just Busted, and I made the cover. So everybody knew, and all my customers knew, and people were calling. And I thought, my life's over. Even if I do get to be with my family, I'm going to lose my job. I dropped out of college. I don't have a degree. I'm 37, 38 years old. What am I going to do? And so I'm thinking about all this as I walk outside, and I turn to look for my sister. And it isn't my sister, it's my father. And so I walked down the street, and my dad was 6 feet if he was anything. He was about 73 years old and out of shape, overweight. But man, he came off the back of that car like he was 18 years old, and he was headed right at me. And I felt like a kid that had broken something in the house again, just like I was little. Punishment was always swift. You get one chance. If you don't get it right, then you get the consequences. That was my whole life. I got spanked from everything from a floss water handle to a shoe to go cut your own switch to whatever was around. And so here I was, 38 years old and way bigger than my dad. And I felt like I was about that big, and I just stood there. And I braced myself for whatever he was going to do. So I hear him coming. He grabs my shirt, and he twists it, and he yanks me to him. And I turned my face just to go, like, just take it like a man. And he pulled my face back to me. He said, son, I love you. It was the first time in my life my dad ever told me that he loved me I can remember. He puts me in the car with him. We go to my house. I get a suit for court, some clothes for the weekend. I start crying as I looked at the den I walked through where my kids always played, and I realized how much of their life that I had just missed because of my addictions and my choices to only care about myself. We get in the car, and it's an hour-and-a-half ride to the farm, and my dad had never spoken of my mother's death, and he started to talk about it. He started to cry. He started to get emotional. I didn't know what to do with that because I'd never seen it. Then he asked me, he said, is this my fault? Was I not a good father? I said, Dad, no, this isn't your fault. You were a good man. You wear a cape in my eyes. You always have, regardless of what happened. I'm a grown man. I made my own choices. This isn't your fault. So we get down to the house, and I go to sleep, wake up Saturday, and it's Holy Saturday, and I spend it like the church does, just in silence and confusion and darkness and not knowing what's going to happen. And then I wake up Sunday morning, and I have the first inkling in my life to go to Mass. I thought, I got to get close to God. I got to go do something. And Bruce, Mississippi has about 600 people, and 599 of them are Protestant. But they have a Catholic room there. I'd been there one time 5 years before. My wife said, if we're going to your dad's on Christmas, we have to go to Christmas Eve Mass or Christmas morning Mass, or I'm not going. So we'd been to this place before. I never spoke to the priest. I walked in with Angela, let her do her thing, sat there, never participated, never said hi to the guy or anything. And here I was all these years later. So I borrowed my dad's car. I drive over there. I pull up for Easter Mass at 10:59. It's supposed to start at 11. There's not a soul there. And I'm thinking, God, are you kidding me? It's Easter weekend and there's nobody here. The one time I want to go to Mass in my life and nobody's here. And I started crying and beating the steering wheel. Well, all of a sudden this sister, habited sister, pulls in, and she'd been with them in that Mass years before. She sees me and says, what are you doing? I was like, I just want to go to Mass. She probably thought I was nuts. But she said, young man, there's too many people. It's Easter. We're down the road in the 4-H club. Do you know where that is? I came back to get something for the priest. If you head there now, you'll beat me back. And so I go down there and I go in. There's all these families and kids, and it was so hard to be in there. But in comes this priest from 5 years before. He had this big old beard, and I just remembered him. And he gave us beautiful Mass in English and Spanish. But they were having a potluck afterwards, and I thought, I'm getting out of here as soon as the last word said of Mass, because I don't want to be around all these families anymore. I get up after he's done. I walk to the door. I get to the door. I grab the handle, and somebody touches me. And I thought, who's touching me? Like, I don't know anybody here. Who's touching me? I turn around. It's this priest that I've never spoken to before. And he says, hello, John. He goes, I don't know where your family is and why they're not with you, but God wants me to tell you that everything's going to be all right. And I said, what did you say? He goes, God wants me to tell you everything's going to be all right. I hope to see you again, and hope next time it's with your family. And he turned around and he disappeared in the crowd. I go out and I get in the car and I go back to my dad's. I thought, I guess that God's going to give me a chance. So we go to Memphis. I go to court. I pled guilty and got put on diversion. There was a Catholic judge there that wanted to give people second chances. So I was able to go take drug tests and pay for that and basically a parole visit. And if I stayed clean, it went off my record. So I left court and I had to go to work. So my dad had to walk me in this place. He worked for 45 years and had a stellar reputation. They'd flown in the CEOs, the CFOs, all the HR people, my bosses. It was literally 30 people and me in a conference room. And they started peppering me with questions. Did you do it at work? Did you do it with customers? Have you done it with any other employees? Did you do it on company property? And all of a sudden I was going, no, yes, no, no, yes, no. And then it hit me. I hadn't talked to my wife since Friday, and it was Monday. And so I got up and they said, what are you doing? I said, I'm leaving. They said, what do you mean you're leaving? You could lose your job. And I said, look, I'm the number one salesman in the company. I've never gotten in trouble. I've made you a lot of money and I've made a lot of money. If you want to fire me, there's nothing I can do about it. I haven't spoken to my wife in 3 days. I don't know if my family's going to stay together or not. I can get another job. I can't get another family. And so I got up and I left. I said, I'm going to rehab. And so I had my dad take me down the street to this rehab facility I'd seen commercials for when I was a kid, in between cartoons and the Three Stooges. And I thought, I'll never be in there. And here I was 40 years later, whoop, 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 right out front. And so I go in and my dad sits in there and I tell him to go wait in the car, because there's so many people bringing their loved ones in and just throwing them in there and saying, take them. They got my ATM card and they bled me dry. They set the house on fire. They've stolen all of my stuff. Like, I don't want them anymore. I've had them in here 12 times. The state can have them. I'm done. And it just got worse and worse. So I was sitting there with a paper over my face, and the people just kept coming in the door. Well, all of a sudden that door opened and nobody walked by, and I looked down and I looked up and it was my wife. And I thought, what are you doing here? Like, what are you doing here? How did you even know I was here? And she goes, John, I'm madder than heck at you. And I'm hurt, but I can't let you go through this alone. And so she sat there with me and she held my hand, and we went to be admitted, and they gave me 30-day outpatient. And then I went outside looking for my dad, and I felt horrible because he was going to have to drive me 2 hours one way every day to rehab for the next 30 days at 73 years old. And so I started looking, I didn't see him, and Angela, I said, Angela, where's my dad? And she goes, I'm not going to make him do that. You're coming home, but don't get it messed up. We're not good. We're not healed. I'm not happy with you, and I'm not sleeping in the same bed with you. So I go home, and my kids hit me. One of my daughters had asked if I was dead, that was 3 years old, because she hadn't seen me in 4 days. So it was like WrestleMania when I walked in the house. They were just all over me, and I started to realize how much I'd almost lost and how much I did lose in that time. I sat there with them until Angela made him go to bed, and then I went to bed. And I thought, well, man, I'm in my comfortable bed and air conditioning and food and all those things, private bathroom. I'm back as the king on the hill. And then I looked over and I saw my wife went in the bed next to me. She was across the hall in my son's bed. I thought, what are you smiling at? What are you think you're just a good person now? You're a terrible person. And maybe you could stop doing the binge drinking and doing the drugs, but like you're still a terrible person. What are you going to do about that? Well, as a former Baptist who was Catholic, who never took Catholicism seriously, I wanted to get close to Jesus, and the only way I knew to do that was to pray or read Scripture. So I started to pray, and that wasn't seeming to be working, so I looked at my bedside table looking for a Bible. Well, I should have looked on her side of the room. There were probably 40. But I found that book from Father Larry Richards, and I read it from cover to cover that night. I stayed up till 5 in the morning, and Angela got up and said, what are you doing up? I said, I never went to sleep. I know I hurt you. I know I've messed up our lives. I know you don't believe anything I say, but this book's telling me how to be a better man, and I promise you I'm going to be a better man. She said, yeah, whatever. I'll believe it when I see it. She had a right to. I read 50 Catholic books that first year. I started going to Mass every day. I started praying. I started making sure my kids saw me at 8 o'clock at night when they went to bed, or 7 or 6, when they went to bed at their different times, and they saw their dad praying. I had a priest take me under his arm, and he started just blessing me with his presence. I went into church to hide from the world one day when all my customers started finding out and telling me, I'll never buy from you again. I'm taking my account away, and my whole work was just crumbling in front of me. And I went to the church to hide one day because I didn't think anybody'd look for me in there. And I was sitting in the second pew on this side of the church when Father processed in by himself. He didn't have anybody with him. The scriptures spoke to my heart that day. I started crying. His homily spoke even further to my heart. I started bawling. And during the consecration, I started out loud sobbing. I was scared to death. I didn't want to move. I didn't even know what to do. I'd always gone to Mass and not paid attention. And so here comes Father down for communion. He looks at me and he calls me by my name, which I didn't even know he knew my name. He said, John, come forward. And I said, no, sir. And he goes, come forward, John. I said, no, sir. He said, John, come and receive the Lord. And I turned around. There was a line of people looking at me like, buddy, you getting up or not? What are we doing here? I'm crying and just ugly crying. I get up. I go up there. I'm trembling. I'm shaking. And he looks at me and he says, this is the body of Christ. And he laid it in my hands, and it was like lightning shot all over my body. For the first time in my life, I believed it was really his presence. I received our Lord. I partook in the blood, the cup. I went back and I prayed right there so hard, I didn't even know Mass had ended. And so all of a sudden, I feel a hand on my shoulder, and I look up, and it's Father Martel. It's another priest, the same priest that did Mass. And he says, John, what are you doing here? Which was a valid question. I never went to Sunday Mass, let alone daily Mass. He saw me crying. He said, come with me. We started tracking to the confessional, and I thought, I don't want to go in there. Last time I went in there, I was arrested. But I go in, and we sit down, and I tried to beat myself up. I said, Father, you don't understand. You don't understand. Doesn't matter. Jesus Christ is going to wash all that away. I'm here to do that in persona Christi. You're going to be a different man. Well, who you were doesn't matter anymore. It's about who you're going to be, and that starts now. But Father, here's a baseball bat. Beat me with it. I need to be beaten. I'm a terrible person. Beat me. No. Here's the mercy of Jesus Christ. So he gives me absolution. Before I could get up to leave, he looks at me. He says, you're going to lecture every day because you don't go to rehab till 10:30. So you're showing up to Mass every day from here on out. I'm going to teach you to lecture. You're going to go to Mass every single day, and you're going to go to confession every Friday until I tell you any different. That man saved my life. And he showed up on January the 14th, January the 15th, the morning my father died, and he prayed with my family and over my father, who hadn't been going to church in years. Shortly after that, the men's conference rolled around. I changed my life. I was going to church all the time. I got involved. I was doing everything. But I wasn't doing anything spiritual in the church, all the coaching and the fundraising and all that stuff. I went to this men's conference, the same one a year later, and there's a little-known priest named Father